As we come to the end of the celebrations of the 25th Jubilee year of African Capacity Building Foundation and the third Pan-African Capacity Development Forum, what are your thoughts on some of the discussions and debates that we've seen in the last 3 days?
I think the conference has gone very well. In fact, it has exceeded our expectations in terms of attendance and in terms of the quality of the discussions and the debate that took place. So these have been 3 days of very useful exchanges and high-level engagement and debate on critical issues that will determine Africa's ability to achieve the Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goals. And so we have been able to highlight the critical capacity challenges and how to build those capacities and who should play what role, and more importantly, how to retain the capacity, how to utilize it, and how to make sure that it is sustainable, and the role that ACBF can play in that regard. So I would say that this has been a very, very successful conference for us.
There has been a lot of talk in the last 3 days of the last 25 years of African Capacity Building Foundation and the positive impact it has had across the continent with capacity building projects. But there is also talk of a lot more work that needs to be done. Could you let us know what the next steps are for the African Capacity Building Foundation in the next 25 years to come?
Yes, you know, the last 25 years of ACBF have been also very successful in terms of the achievements that the foundation have made. For instance, the foundation has been able to really train thousands and thousands of very skilled people in the areas of economic policy management, in macroeconomic analysis, and in the area of financial management, and even debt management. But it has also trained thousands and thousands of public administrators and supported parliaments and their staff. So in terms of human capital, the foundation has done quite well. In terms of institutions, ACBF has, over these 25 years, created over 60 think tanks in the continent, and 20 of them are very highly ranked. In fact, ACBF's support was responsible for the creation of the Ethiopian Commodity Board, which everybody looks at these days as a good example of an entity that can support agricultural development. ACBF has also established a number of policy units, supported units in the regional economic communities and the African Union to promote regional integration. It has created a number of institutions and projects that has empowered women. And our recent one, the most important, is our Empowering Women in Agriculture, which is led by President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia. And ACBF has also created a platform, you know, like this is our celebration of our 25th anniversary, a platform for dialogue on issues related to Africa's development and the capacity dimensions of that. And we have done numerous and numerous of studies, and you know, that has provided knowledge and learning across the continent and across the world on what works and what doesn't work. So through our publications, such as the Africa Capacity Report, we have been able to really produce and share knowledge. But looking forward in the next 25 years, we hope that ACBF by then would have worked itself out of business, because if we want to really build capacity in Africa, we should be having an end game to see that there will be no need for an ACBF, hopefully, after, in the next, after 25 years of existence. But we have a strategy to really face in a frontal manner and in a very strong way and in a very, very effective way the capacity challenges that the continent is still facing in spite of all our achievements. So we have developed a 5-year plan which will start in 2017 and end in 2021. And this 5-year plan has 4 pillars. One is really enabling the achievement of continental priorities and supporting African countries to achieve development results, and enhancing the ability of the private sector and the civil society to contribute to sustainable development in the continent, and finally leveraging knowledge for really to achieve development results on the continent. And we are going to continue giving grants. We're going to continue to provide capacity development services and advisory services. Although this is a new line of business for us, some of them will be for fee, and some of them would be based on cost, cost containment. And then we shall also continue to produce knowledge that is strategically in a position to tackle specific issues and conduct a lot of country level and organization level capacity needs assessment, which will help us to develop capacity building strategies and help to implement those. And finally, we're going to be heavily involved in resource mobilization for capacity building on the continent, both for ACBF and for others. And then the last area that we will be focusing on is to ensure that we pay attention to innovations in capacity building, because we believe that this is very important.
We're expecting a communiqué later today. Could you maybe elaborate on some of the highlights that we're likely to get from this?
Well, I haven't seen the communiqué yet, but I know that there are a lot of things that will come out very strongly, and that has been come out very strongly throughout these discussions, both at the plenary level and at the breakout sessions that were highly well attended and very, very informative. The first thing is that a lot has been achieved in the past 25 years of ACBF in building capacity on the continent and building critical skills that are needed, in building and strengthening institutions, and in focusing attention on the soft capacities such as leadership, mindset change, African values, the solidarity and Pan-Africanism, and things of that nature. But the point that has come out is that despite all these achievements, there are still significant capacity challenges, especially the ones that are needed to achieve the Continental Agenda 2063, to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, or to address critical issues such as climate change, youth unemployment, migration, some sort of terrorism and some conflicts, as well as the persistent problem of inequality and poverty, especially from a gender perspective, and in fact addressing the Africa's high population growth rate and dealing with agricultural issues. So there's recognition that a lot needs to be done, and ACBF has been called upon to step up to the plate and continue to play leadership and critical role in building the capacity that's needed to achieve these goals. And we at ACBF has committed that we will strongly play our role, but we need support for us to be able to play that role. We need our benefactors and our donors to continue to provide us with the resources we need to continue to do the good job that we're doing. We also need political support by our member states. My goal is to increase that member state from 39 to 54 so that every African country is a member of ACBF, and we want to also to escalate our work from the current 45 countries we're in to 54 countries so that we can help every African country to build the capacity that is needed. But one other thing that is coming out strongly is that building capacity is very important, but it's not enough. The greater challenge is how to make sure you utilize the capacity fully, how to make sure that you retain that capacity, and how to make sure that you do this in a sustainable manner. So capacity utilization, capacity retention, and capacity harmonization, including the sustainability of capacity projects, are issues that have come out very strongly and very throughout the conference that we have had here.
Two areas that have had a lot of discussions are the capacity building and utilization of the capacities that are not just created, but are also built and retained. Especially the key focus areas has been STEM education, STEM disciplines, and higher education. How do you think you will address these issues as the African Capacity Building Foundation?
No, one of the things we have proposed already is to have, number one, a high-level tripartite education dialogue. That's number one. That will involve the institutions of higher learning, universities and vocational education institutions, the private sector, and government. Because there needs to be this kind of discussion of, number one, why aren't African universities educating African young people to solve Africa's problem? Because I believe that if people get educations that are Africa-specific or focusing on the continent, chances are that they will utilize that to deal with the problems here rather than going somewhere else to practice. That's one. Number two is, how do we make sure that the people that we're producing in these institutions of higher learning are employable or self-employable. Many times, the migrants that we see leaving Africa is because of lack of opportunity for employment. And so that is a very major issue that we have to tackle. But secondly, I also talk about developing a capacity retention strategy. It will not be the same for every country, because some countries have the problem in a different way, or they don't have it at all. But the majority of the countries do have that. So we're now working with them to say, what are the critical drivers of lack of retention? How can we tackle them? Some of them are political, some of them are institutional, and some of them are social, and of course, the majority is economic. So how do we change incentive structure? How do we make sure that we do the kind of work that is done from all these various angles to ensure that the environment that the young people are facing is one that will make them want to stay and make a useful contribution to their countries. But the other element is also investing heavily in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, so that we can change the balance that is tilted towards humanities and social sciences and law. Although these are important subjects, but if you want to industrialize and you want to transform, do the economic transformation, you need to have these kinds of critical technical skills, and you need to retain them as well. So we are developing capacity retention strategies that will help African countries to address the problem.
You have mentioned quite often that there are now 39 states as member states of the African Capacity Building Foundation, and you'd like to take this number to 54 to cover the whole of Africa. And you did mention that you had to create a value-added proposition to these potential member states. So if you had to give one key message to the states that are not yet members, what would this be?
I would say that the gap between designing good strategies and good policies and getting results on the ground is implementation. And the challenge of implementation is a challenge of lack of capacity. And ACBF is the unique organization that squarely focuses on capacity development. And it has 25 years of experience doing this. It understands the African continent very well. And in the toolbox, we have several tools to utilize to address the problem, depending on the nature of the problem. And we have a dedicated staff, and we also have a whole lot of partnerships and networks out there that we can always use to address these problems. So they have a lot to gain if they want to really address the implementation gap in their country, that by really working with ACBF, and more importantly, by becoming a member state of ACBF. So that we will continue to do the job we're doing. Our ultimate goal, as you know, is to fulfill our vision, which is an Africa capable of achieving its own development.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.